Welcome to our session. We've got an interesting session for you this evening. We've got three different perspectives on how technology can be used in public engagement. Brandon Palanker, he's the Vice President of Marketing and Public Affairs for Renaissance Downtown, which is an East Coast, Plainview, New York development company who uses grassroots campaigns to manage public process, entitlements, and engagement with development projects. We have Robert Vogel, who is the CEO of Peak Democracy from the West Coast. So we've got both coasts represented, Berkeley area, and Peak Democracy manages a product called Open Town Hall, which is an online public forum where people can engage in commenting on their various planning or other engagement and development products. And I'm Nole Walkingshaw. I work for Salt Lake City in their planning office, and I manage our public engagement activities for Salt Lake City's planning office, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do. So with that, I'll let Brandon get right into his presentation.
Appreciate it. I want to thank the hardcore CNUers who are still sticking around. Hopefully all will join for the little party afterward. This will be a somewhat repetitive to a degree for those who saw earlier this morning, but certainly much more fleshed out, and I think there'll be value either way. But as backdrop, I think it's important to understand I'm a developer, and sometimes from the planning world that's the bad guy. Certainly from the community perspective it's the bad guy. But at the end of the day, we all have to find a way to work together if we're going to create these great places. And I think something that's very interesting is my company, Renaissance Downtowns. I've been with them for about 8 years. Renaissance as a brand is only about 5 years old. And we were born from a company that did suburban sprawl, and we're based on Long Island. So what do you think we did for 30 of those 35 years? We built strip centers, single-family home, hamlets, Class A office space. But we recognized that things were changing in the world, and there's this tremendous market that's pushing for urban living. And this second stat, I think, is really prominent. Over the last 20 years, we've seen that big push to the major metro areas, New York and San Francisco, Chicago, that inner city core that's really been built up. But what's happened over those 20 years, we'll take New York as an example. You had your Friends, the television show, made New York popular again, living in downtown. A few 20-somethings, they pull some money, they get a cool loft in the Lower East Side or somewhere in Manhattan, and that loft's probably $6.9 million today. They can't afford Brooklyn. They can't afford Hoboken. So we see the opportunity as your near-in suburbs, your first, second, in some cases third-ring suburbs connected by transit. But when you get into this area, while the market wants this, that we all sort of understand intrinsically, this is at least what the vocal part of the community comes out against. And Queensification is the one word that's sort of local. Somehow Queens, which by the way is the most diverse area in the entire country, and a fantastic place. But from a Long Islander's perspective, Queens is what's in between you and New York City. And when you drive by, there's an area called LaFrac City, bunch of tall brick buildings, and everyone thinks if you're talking density, if you're talking downtowns at height, all of a sudden we're going to destroy single-family communities, destroy that fabric, and replace it with, God forbid, Queensification. So we have to find a way to get the public on board for what we call urban nodes in suburbia. And as a company, we learned this the hard way. We're involved in a project in Glen Cove, New York, adjacent to the town I grew up in and where I live today. And it's taken us 8 years. We are finally approved, going to break ground this year or next. But as a business model, even if this is what the market wants, I can't go as a developer, spend millions and millions of dollars, and after half a decade, not know if I have an approval. So there has to be a better way. So we recognized without public support, we're not going anywhere. And I think we need to back up to really understand if we're going to gain the trust of the public and a partnership, you have to sort of understand what we are as social beings, because that is the root of being human, of interacting, of being part of a process. And early on, every place was a village. You knew what was going on with your neighbors, with the decision makers. You were part of that chain. And then the city started to grow. And what you saw, even as New York started to become a metropolis and a megalopolis, is you had these little neighborhoods that were sort of distinct communities unto themselves. So to a large degree, people were still connected with one another, with their leadership structure. And then the suburbs came. and it all blew up. And you might not have met your neighbor that's 2 or 3 houses away, though you've lived there for 10 years. It's isolating. But then the internet came along, and all of a sudden, boom, networks were built. I can talk to someone who's in Turkey just as well I can talk to someone down the street. But the great thing is we can now engage. And the joy of that is it allows this part of the long tail theory. I'm not sure who's familiar with that. It's a fairly common economic term. But essentially the long tail is about this. When you're talking about the economics of it, 2% controls 90% of the market. Your Walmarts, your Starbucks, your big box stores, and those major players. When you switch that to the power structure, 2% of the community, your leaders, your political parties, the money, the wealth, the civic gatherings, those is a very small and confined group of people that are dictating policy. But this is 98% of the community. And if you can find a way to bring them together, they are far more powerful than that 2%. So understanding this, we have to recognize we cannot keep coming up with plans and trying to sell them to the community. That is going about a process the same way and begging for different results. We realize you have to have an effort that's not plan over process, because that is divisive, because it's an oligarchy. It's the developer, the planning community, maybe the municipality. We are making the plan, and we have to sell it to the community. So we are that red person on the pedestal that is going to tell the 98%, by the way, this is your future. Maybe we can make an adjustment here or there, but by the way, there's 3 people voting, we have 2 votes, is what it is. So what is this? This is the result. The community is left out. They don't trust or understand the process. This is Tuesday night at any city hall. And as a developer, I know the game. You want nothing as a community. Not really the community, just the 10 loudmouths, the 10 NIMBYs. So I have to ask for 10. You want 0, I want 10. 5 years later, a few $1 million later, I hope we're back at 5, or maybe 4 with a marginal project. This is the 98%. This is the crowd. We have to find a way to reach and engage that. So then we said, all right, what about charrettes? And as I mentioned this morning, I might ruffle a few feathers. Charrettes are very well intended, and at times very, very successful. But when you have 1 week to go about a number of iterations for what might be $1 billion or $2 billion redevelopment that's going to transform a community with, by the way, usually the same self-selected group of participants that's showing up at town or city hall, is that really including the 98%? Is that really including this? How do you charrette with hundreds, thousands, maybe even on a regional level, tens of thousands of people? We have to find a way to energize the silent majority so that they demand positive change. That's how the leadership, the 2%, will respond when the 98% really gets together. Because the conversation is happening. And if you don't manage it, it will manage you. And we all deal with this. This is the brain damage factor that we need to find a way to get over. And the way to get over it is finding a process that collectively, in partnership with the community, will derive a plan that everyone buys into. And without going into too much detail, it really comes down to crowdsourcing and tying that into placemaking. And crowdsourcing is taking a task that's traditionally done in-house by a company and outsourcing it to the community by an open call. Hey folks, you at the end of the day are the consumers. Why don't you participate in creating what this product is going to be? And that's what crowdsourced placemaking is when we're bringing that to the real estate development side of the equation. There are rules to the road. It abides by the triple bottom line: social, economic, environmental responsibility. You need that rule. Why? Because as a community, I can't say, what do you want us to build? Because you're going to give me a whole bunch of things that might not be economically feasible or environmentally responsible, so we're going to work together under this pretense. And using crowdsourced placemaking, what we're able to do is create a grassroots social media campaign. Grassroots means you have a community, you're rallying around a cause. Our cause, that triple bottom line development. So we meet in person, but the conversation happens every day online through the internet, and this is how it works. It's a patent-pending process, and using the internet, folks are allowed to upload ideas, what they want to see us build: stores, shops, amenities, but they have to sign an agreement. All of those ideas must abide by the triple bottom line. In Bristol, Connecticut, city of 60,000 people, smack in the middle of Connecticut, as suburban as it gets, we have 2,500 individuals who have signed that electronic agreement who are participating. 5,000 people vote in their mayoral election. And this is how that goes. They upload ideas. They wanted a bookstore. Bookstore is a very quaint and wonderful idea. We do feasibility studies on the top vote getters. Well, surprise, surprise, a bookstore wasn't going to make it. That's not going to be economically nor socially responsible. So that's a feedback loop to the community. We say, well, we know you want a bookstore. This is why it's not going to work. We're showing them our math. However, a bookstore, if you combine it with a cafe, a little performing arts venue for a gal or a guy in their acoustic guitar, that pencils out. So through that process, we are able to get crowd-supported ideas and actually implement them into viable businesses. 7 businesses have opened in Bristol over the last year or so, all local, independently owned. We as the developer have not directly invested in any of them. That's very important. And this barley vine is one of those success stories. So economic development, job growth, momentum, and most importantly of all, support for the redevelopment of that downtown is building by everyone who voted for this idea, everyone who's a customer here, anyone who knows who these proprietors are. The second great thing about this process is it tends to what I call the you can't have your cake and eat it too syndrome. In the suburbs, everyone wants the amenity, the public square, the library wing, almost everyone wants the retail. Most people want the commercial. Residential scares the crap out of people. But without the residential, the downtown doesn't work. So in Bristol, we explain to them, if you want those mom and pop stores, you're going to need 3, 4, and 5 stories. 2 stories will not do it. And there were members of the community that anything above 2 stories really scared them. And this is the really amazing thing. The biggest vote getter by far was this public piazza. So we did the math. We came back to them. You can have your public piazza, but by the way, it may necessitate a 7 to 10-story boutique hotel, because without the right activity, you're not going to have a dead, indefensible space there. And economically, if we're not building here, we need to build more somewhere else. So it's a very transparent process. Again, we're showing the math, we're lifting the hood. Now in Bristol, something amazing happened. The community really rallied behind this idea. And they said, well, if this means we might need a 7 to 10-story boutique hotel, we want this amenity, we understand. In another community that I'll touch upon in a couple minutes, 10 stories, never going to fly. But that's okay. It could work at 5 stories. You're just going to have pocket parks, smaller amenities. There are a range of options, not one plan that we, as a developer, the planning community, possibly the municipality, are trying to sell. So working with the community, we find what's going to work within that range. And when that happens, and the community has buy-in for the stores, for the amenities, they all of a sudden want to see this happen. And as a result, volunteers from Bristol came to us. They wanted to throw a festival. 2 years running, between 15 and 20,000 people, between a quarter and a third of the entire population, showed up for the largest single-day event in the city's history. What does that lead to? 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans, bickering about absolutely everything for 15 agenda items. But we had 100 people in the audience, most of them wearing bright orange Bristol Rising shirts. All of a sudden, that long tail was telling the big head, you better vote yes. It really turned the paradigm on its head. And this is something which really gathered a lot of steam and has really helped our company, more importantly, help the communities in which we work. And the great thing is, we're going to break ground this year or next in Bristol, but crowdsourcing in that community is going to live on. They're doing street cleanups. They're doing cash mobs. They're supporting these businesses. We then took that to Hempstead, New York, and we learned some lessons in Hempstead. Hempstead's an economically challenged community. There's a digital divide. There's a language divide, and while the community online wasn't as large as Bristol, the fact that we engaged in this conversation and realized for them, the most important thing was a community benefits agreement, local jobs provisions. And this is an area that looks like this. So we had issues at first on any development because of that mistrust. But at the end of the day, we are now approved for the largest single project in the history of Long Island because we engaged the community, brought them on board, and worked this organically. And that's the joy, because we're going to create this place that at first scared people to death. And now they're fully behind it. Private property owners are coming to us, taking some of the ideas, fresh food, the idea of having gardening in town, rooftop gardens in a suburban, urban, downtown setting. And as I said, community benefits agreement was key. Well, we had a jobs fair about 2 months ago, 2,000 attendees. The Democrats, the Republicans, and everyone in between. It's crazy in Hempstead. We're all for the project. That's the joy of crowdsourcing. We got 3,500 residential units approved in one of the highest barrier to entry markets in the entire nation. For those who know New York SECRA, it is a bear. 120 days is the statutory minimum. We were able to accomplish all zoning, All approvals in 127 days because the municipality was on board. Most importantly, the community was on board. It's taking what used to look like this, a great place, what now looks like this, which is opportunity, and we're going to be able to create a walkable, transit-oriented development. And as the final chapter in this story, Huntington Station, New York, where we took what we learned up in Bristol, a lot of the hard lessons we learned in Hempstead, as great as that success was, we learned a lot of lessons crowdsourcing-wise. And Huntington is not an easy place to do business. Avalon Bay has gotten their heads bashed in to try to get 300 units approved. I talked about Queensification. King of Queens behind Huntington Station redevelopment proposal. This is the environment that we walked into. Well, when you bring folks on board, we have 800 members, where at the same time in this effort in Bristol, we had 600 efforts. 3,400 votes have already taken place. This is the article we got 3 weeks ago. We got our first key approval, and we're going to be implementing next year. So what are the lessons? Again, community sentiment means you have to bring in that silent majority. We have support. We just have to find out how to engage that long tail, because the communication, it is happening one way or the other. But it's a dialogue. You're not pushing information. You're not selling a plan or telling people why this is good for you. You are earnest with them, and at root, because we're social beings, we're utilizing that not to our advantage as the developer, but to our advantage as a community. And yes, it's about ROI. It's about taking a years-long process and boiling it down to months. It's about gaining that public support, and while you're doing it, getting some real key insight. And remember that graph from before? Well, there's your big head. Here's your long tail. And the long tail says, we want this, and the big head has listened. Now, all of a sudden, when that 2% of leadership looks out, they are not looking out to dictate. They are looking out to listen and to take in what the community wants. Because the crowd has spoken, and placemaking is the result. Implementation is the key. So thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Brandon, and I've got some questions for you when we get done here.
I may have answers. We'll
Okay. We're powering up here. So I want to offer a little bit different perspective on this, which is the city's perspective, and that is in Salt Lake City, we've tried to make some pretty serious efforts towards not only just engaging the community, but maintaining, building trust with the community. It wasn't too long ago, Salt Lake City, in our planning and our building services department, really was going through a bad time with the community. There was a lot of distrust in what we were doing. We were not expressing ourselves well. We didn't have consistency in our processes. And that became very, very important for us in order to survive as an agency. We had a lot of turnover, we had a lot of problems, and we were having problems with both the development community and the public. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, one of the first key pieces in public participation from a municipal's point of view is consistency. Having good documented processes, having predictable processes, and explaining those processes, and offering consistent opportunities for people to engage, both on the large-scale projects, but also on the neighborhood projects, on the small conditional use projects, on the smaller plan development projects, and being very consistent. And I think that what we've done in Salt Lake City helps us do that. And I just wanted, I know it's kind of boring to show just a basic web page, but I wanted to talk about how we've done that. And part of that is we've spelled out all of our processes for people. So any person can come in and in a simple way, whether you're entering our processes or you're trying to figure out what our processes are, we've spelled each of those processes out for people in an easy and understandable way. And then we go one step beyond that, and we offer a live connection to our applications. You can click in. You say, I'm curious, we're just going to pick one at random. We don't do many. Let's just do one that we... major alteration of a historic structure. You can search by address, you can search by different things. And what we've done is we've created very consistent, transparent, and predictable processes. And I can show you later that we publish this data for the people. If you want to know what is happening at 564 North Wall Street, here it is. Here's how much they paid. Here's the status. Looks like it just barely came in. I picked the first one, came in last week. It's been assigned to our manager. And if the process was done, you would be able to see the staff report and all of the application and attachments that were done. This has helped us a great deal in building confidence with the community. Prior to this, we were accused constantly that we were giving favoritism to one person and not somebody else, and we couldn't defend ourselves, right? The first time when we started this process, I sat down and I said, okay, 5 senior people who'd been sitting there had worked for the city for 15 years. I said, what is the conditional use process? And I got 5 different answers, right? So one of the things I think that when we first started thinking about how are we going to approach our public engagement process was knowing what our processes were and being consistent. Okay. So I'll move on to something that's a little more flashy. That is impressive. Yeah, and I can show you, we actually now publish this data in a consumable format where people can just create their own maps, create their own subscriptions, and all of that through our open data portal. But I wasn't going to go all the way there today. Let me just close this, sorry. So the next thing that we found was we weren't very good at websites. You know, we said, go to our website, right? And we go to our website, and you could go there, and we created a website one day for the project, and 6 months later, the website looked essentially the same. You had no real understanding what was going on. And a lot of that problem that we suffered from was that I'm a planner, I'm not a website person, right? And we did have a website person, but it was our secretary. And for me to tell her what to do to get from here to there, we missed that communication. So we needed to come up with a better way of building websites, and we needed to dumb it down a little bit. And so what we did is we went with WordPress sites. Oh, here's one. This is a real basic one. Here's one here's a project that no one wants to do. No one wants to rewrite the ordinance on how the city recognizes community organizations, right? You're stepping into a trap with this one. I volunteered for it because I like traps. And we decided that the best way to do that was to just do a basic WordPress blog. I spelled out what it was. I met with the people. Every time I would go to a meeting, I would follow it up, and then I would demonstrate, here was my first draft. Here's the updated draft. I said, I went, this is what I heard, this is how I changed it. Then I would go to another meeting. I met with you, I met with that. And if you know how to do basic word editing as a planner, you now can just do a basic update, and it keeps people in the loop. And it demonstrates that you're listening. So by the time we got to the public hearing, there were some questions, right? There were some minor questions to this process. And I was, one of the things that we said was, the impression was we were going to take the community organizations formally out of the ordinance because we were writing a public engagement policy. But we didn't have the policy, right, written. So what I did is I prepared a policy. I wrote a policy, I posted the policy, I took it to all the people that had already been engaged with that I've had on the hook because they were listening because I was responding. I wrote a policy, we back and forth the policy a couple of times, and I got in front of the Planning Commission, and I got a positive recommendation. This was last December. It's now been transmitted to our City Council, and it looks like we're going to get this adopted And for about 4 years, this process, people were saying, there's absolutely no way that you're going to get this ordinance adopted and update how we recognize people. And we all know that in 1989, when this ordinance on how the city recognizes people, and today times have changed, right? We didn't have cell phones or internet or email or anything. And our business model was based off of a 1989 business model. And it was causing us problems. So I want to show you what else we've done. And I think that we've decided to add a little bit of flair to that by creating just open public forums. Speak out. We just let people comment in general areas, and we mine this information for ideas, what people are thinking, and we can set up a really small micro forum for smaller projects that aren't necessarily needing a website. Here's just a basic rezone information. You can click on the map, and within a couple minutes we can create a website, and people have the opportunity to participate and engage. So, the one part of this story that is interesting is it would have been really, really hard to do this had we not been experiencing a crisis, right? It's really hard to get people to make a decision if you're not experiencing a crisis. Well, in Salt Lake City, in 2010, we were experiencing a crisis. We have a nice neighborhood up on the east side, and there were a lot of demolitions in that, and people were making monster homes. And so there was one group of people that wanted to create a historic district, other people who didn't want a historic district. And we were going into these public meetings with 200 people, and they're all lynching and hanging the politicians, and he said, she said, they said, and no one could straighten it out, right? And people were in-house were panicking. You know, the system was failing. And we didn't know what to do. The state was getting involved. State legislature was looking at creating new state laws saying that we couldn't zone historic properties anymore. And they're trying to figure out what to do. And the big part of it was we were not able to create a consistent message. And we were not able to allow people to engage in their own terms. So I was in Las Vegas, and I was presenting. I also manage our electronic plan submission and review. Salt Lake City, if you're ever curious about electronic plan submissions, we are able to manage all of our building permit processes digitally. All of the big buildings that you see going up around town is all done paperless. And I was in Las Vegas giving a presentation on that, and at a conference similar to this, and during a downtime, I met Robert's partner here, Mike Cohen, and explained our plight. And he explained to me a product that they have, which is their Open City Hall. I think they call it Open Town Hall now. And we created a version for Salt Lake City while we were sitting in the lobby, because that's the way these guys operate. And I took it home and I said, hey, look, we could maybe diffuse some of this. And there was a lot of apprehension in the city, right? It's like, well, we've never done that before. We have never taken comments digitally. I don't know if we can do it. But the politicians were so fearful that they were literally going to get lynched or something that they said, okay, let's go for it. And we did it. And we were able to present. I'm not sure how to make this view better, I guess. And we were able to do it. We had 143 people comment. Some were, and if you notice, the status is under review, because the state did decide to kick in, and they passed a moratorium saying we couldn't do a historic district in Salt Lake City until we had a official process. That moratorium expired 2 weeks ago. And now we have new applications and a new process on how to expire. But through that process, we were able to bring some sense to the chaos that was out there. And since that time, we've managed, I think, over 100 different topics. We have a lot of confidence now from the community that we're transparent. We have a lot of confidence that we are trying hard to engage. We screw up all the time, of course, but we're building that confidence. But what it's also done through these various processes that we've done is we have repeat users. And that is what's helping us the most. Is so often we go out and we have an open house and we capture like 4 or 5 people and they seem really interested, and then we lose them. And the next time we go out, we've got 4 or 5 new customers, and then we lose them. So what we're trying to do is focusing through these different tools is now when we go out there, we're still doing our open houses, we're still doing our charrettes, but we try to, every time we get one of those folks that seems kind of interested, we keep them on the hook, right? We bring them into these different systems. They can subscribe, they can get alerts, they can become interested in the things they want, and they become repeat users. And so I think that's part of the process for us that I wanted to share about the Salt Lake City strategy is that we're really focusing on keeping people engaged. And by using these various digital tools, we're now getting people who can't come to open houses, that can't come to the city council meetings, you know. For 2 decades, I love to stereotype, but all decisions were made by empty nested ladies from 48 to 80, right? All of the decisions were made by them. And now we're shifting that. We're seeing that. You can see in our new topics, you can see the demographics of that. And so that's kind of the point that I want to try to make for you is when you go back home, if you work in a planning agency like I do, is how do you focus your strategies to be consistent and repeatable, and that folks can re-engage, that you're not going after the person one time for the one thing that's next door. Okay, and with that, I'll let Robert go. And we're hoping to leave plenty of time for questions today, because I know that hopefully you'll have one or two.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Robert Vogel, a CEO and a co-founder of Peak Democracy, and I decided to title the talk today, Technology as a Mirror, Technology as a Channel, because this is a session about digital technologies that help build communities. And I'm starting out in this topic with a basic assumption, and that is that technology can build community by helping communities define and meet their own goals. And there's 2 pieces to that. Defining goals. How can technology help a community define a goal? Well, technology can act as a mirror that reflects community values back to the community. So here's your typical community thinking about her values and where she is now and where she's going to be. And technology is kind of like a mirror that can reflect community's values back to the community. And the other characteristic I want to focus on is using technology to help a community meet those goals. Technology can be a channel that connects community members with the local government decision process. So here's that channel connecting the community member to the government decision process off on the right side there. So how exactly does that work? Well, I'm going to propose to talk about this in three phases. First, briefly about the company, Peak Democracy, that I co-founded with Mike, and then technology as a mirror and as a channel, and then Q&A for all of us. So we founded this company back in 2007, and we work with government agencies to broaden civic engagement in ways that build public trust in government. Here's the two of us. We actually have backgrounds in technology from Silicon Valley, and at this stage we're interested in building software that does good and provides a public service. And to date we've worked with more than 60 client government agencies on over 100 different forum topics involving more than 100,000 constituents. Here's some of our clients right now. So, why is it that we focus on online civic engagement? And the answer is that citizens have great insights. They have great insights, they want to contribute to those insights, but face-to-face meetings can be really tough. Typically, it's difficult to come to a face-to-face meeting at some late hour of the evening. It's hard to get out of your home, out of the couch, etc. And so the people who tend to show up at these meetings tend to have rather extreme views. They're not necessarily representative of the community, and this can lead to government decisions that are frustrating for many people. So simply by making participation easy, by allowing people to participate in the ways that most people are participating now in their business life, their social life, their just day-to-day life, they can get online at their own schedule from their own home or place of work and participate in that mode, you open it up to many, many more people who otherwise would never participate. These folks have a tendency to have more moderate views and views that are more representative of the entire community. So that's why we're focusing on broadening civic engagement so that it's more representative and leaders can make deliberations which are more informed in ways that can increase public trust in government. Okay, so let's take a look at how technology can actually function as a mirror and how it can reflect back to a community what those community values actually are. And for this, I'm going to switch out to look at a few of real-life examples of how various towns and cities and counties are doing that right now across the country. So I'll start here in Aspen, Colorado. And the first thing I'd like to point out is that very kind of straightforward. Here's a question that they're asking about how to develop the intersection of Hunter Street and Durant Avenue to improve access for pedestrians, bicyclists, and also vehicle traffic. And the first thing you notice is that there are comments. There are comments that the City of Aspen is collecting that the City of Aspen is actually displaying on its own website. And so the first thing that residents of Aspen can do is look to see what other people are saying there in Aspen on the city website. Here's another example of that locally. Salt Lake County is working with us, and here's what their comments look like under the question of what do you think about the Parks and Trails bond proposal. You can see it's also possible to post videos and images. But just simply presenting comments for public consumption is just the beginning of the story. It's also important to present some kind of analysis of all the comments, because you can end up getting a lot of comments. And how do you make sense out of several dozens or hundreds, or in some cases even more than 1,000 comments? So next I'd like to show you an example in California of how San Ramon is handling that. San Ramon, California, east of Silicon Valley, asked its residents how should the city celebrate the 4th of July. And that particular topic, here's their introduction. They actually made this into a small poll, and they had more than 300 people participate in this. And what you can see in this example is that there's this gray bar of analysis tools. Now again, these are tools that anybody in the world can use to make some sense out of those comments. This is a way in which the technology is acting as a mirror to inform the community what the community thinks about the 4th of July celebration. We have actually 7 different tools on this particular case. Let's take a look at their map. And San Ramon, California has a number of elementary school districts. And what we're doing in this case is we're drawing what we call a heat map, which shows by elementary school zone the number of comments that were submitted to this topic. And as you hover over each one of these zones here, you can actually see a tally of the responses to this poll by elementary school district, like so. And then by clicking on any one of these districts, you can drill down to that one elementary school district and see what the comments are within that one district. So this was actually useful because it turns out that the people who lived far away from the park where they were going to celebrate the 4th of July with fireworks had a different perspective than the people who lived close in. The people who lived far away weren't bothered by all the traffic and the litter. Those who lived close in were, and you could tell that in their comments. This helped the council make an informed decision about this particular decision. Here's Palo Alto. Palo Alto, California was constructing a fountain in the center of the city, and they invited 3 world-class designers to submit proposals on what the fountain design should be. And here is the description of those 3 proposals along with pictures. And they also made this into a small poll where they asked residents to participate. And again, they had in this case more than 400 participants, and this is what their insight bar looked like that anyone in the world could take a look at. So here is an example of a project that has a specific point. The fountain has a point in the city. They have 24 different neighborhoods. You can hover around the different neighborhoods and look at the responses by neighborhood, but you can also look at the responses by distance from the fountain. And it turns out the people who live nearby the fountain had a different perspective than the people who live far away. And so by hovering over these different regions, distance from the fountain, you could compare the difference of opinions by distance from the fountain. Of course, this is a very simple and great way of illustrating the NIMBY effect. Some people who aren't aware of that effect become aware of this through this process. And simply by making this information available to the entire community can change the nature of the dialogue significantly. Sometimes people expect an NIMBY effect when there isn't one, and making that information available can change the nature of a dialogue considerably. Okay, again, these are tools to help a community understand what the community thinks. Since this is Palo Alto, and these were world-famous designers, there was actually interest from people all across the country. Another one of our tools enables users to look at the different input from Brooklyn, New York, and Berkeley, California, and all over the place. But if you want to just focus in on New York is here, if you want to focus in on Palo Alto, you can do that there. Okay, let me show you some more of the ways in which technology can function as a mirror. In Arlington, Virginia, they are looking at priorities for bringing healthy and nutritious food to the community. And here's an example of asking people to take a look at a list of different possible ways of accomplishing that goal. And in this case, they use what we call a priority list, where residents could simply drag their priorities up and down in this list, like so. And then go back to the statements page and see again as a mirror what everyone is saying about these priorities. So far they've had 50 residents participate in this. Here's the overall priorities averaged over all of the participants to date. And here's the priorities segregated by regions on the map. Another community, St. Paul, Minnesota, is going about prioritization in a similar way. Here they're asking about opportunities for increasing the amount of materials kept out of landfills for the household. And here are the priorities. There's 5 of them. And here are the average priorities from these 150 plus people. Okay, Delray Beach, Florida is approaching prioritization in yet a different way. They're actually doing they did a budget topic in which they gave each participant an imaginary $500 to spend across different results that they wanted to see. And here are the results that they asked people to analyze: abundant recreational opportunities, community of quality neighborhoods, community where people embrace cultural diversity, etc. And across these different prioritizations, this is what the participants said here. Here, since it's numeric, you can average the allocations of the $500 across all the people who participated and also get that broken out by map. Okay, these way of prioritizing is also available on the map. And let me show you one very cool example here up in Portland. Portland also did a $500 exercise, although it wasn't per se for the budget. It was more to collect a general sense of priorities, investing in a transportation corridor along the Foster Corridor in East Portland. And so the priorities that people were given to invest in were things like improving pedestrian environment, planting additional street trees, improving sidewalks, etc. More than 100 people in Portland participated in this exercise, and here are the priorities from those participants. And here's the map. Again, this is a kind of a cool way of looking at the results, because here's the Foster Road in here, and this is the half-mile corridor around Foster Road, and you can again see the way in which people prioritize those various investments when they live close into the corridor or further away from the corridor. They also have neighborhoods. They wanted to look at it in that fashion as well. Okay, so all of these tools, these are publicly available tools that allow everyone to look at what everyone is saying. It's a mirror onto what the community is saying about itself. Okay, let me give you just two more quick examples, and then we'll go on to the way in which it functions as a channel that connects citizens to the decision process. I'm going to switch over now to, let's go to Santa Cruz. This is a test topic. They're going to launch this in the future. This is a way of giving residents an opportunity to indicate, let me do this here, to indicate how they would like to see different types of land uses assigned to different regions in the county. So residents can do this by, for example, selecting small lot single-family development and putting some here and some here. And then in the aggregate, you can look at these. In the aggregate, you can look at the way in which this gets aggregated across all of the participants here in the aggregate area plan. So this is aggregated over all of the residents. Okay, so let me now go on to ways in which this functions as a channel that connects residents to the actual decision-making process. You know, it's one thing to provide input and to see what everyone else is saying, but what really gets people motivated is the knowledge that what they're saying is actually having an impact, that decision-makers are actually listening to what they're saying and are incorporating their impact into the official decision process. So that's kind of the other side of the equation here. And the way our clients have chosen to meet that requirement, our clients want to demonstrate that they are listening to what people say. There's several ways in which they do that. The first way in which they do that is I want to point out that all of these examples are running actually on the government website. Our forum is actually embedded inside the City of St. Paul's website, inside the Wellington, Florida's website, inside the Delray Beach, Florida's website. So just right away, when a citizen arrives at the opportunity to participate, they see they're participating in an official government process because it's on the official government website. So that's the first thing. Second thing I'd like to point out is that in every case, the topics that people were discussing were introduced by city staff. This is basically excerpts from a staff report on the fountain proposals in Palo Alto. Here in San Ramon, the introduction was written by San Ramon staff on the benefits and costs of celebrating the 4th of July in various ways. Okay. And if you look at the overview, you can see that's what our clients do. These are all the different, right now they're closed topics in San Ramon, and these are typical topics. It's an ongoing stream of topics that the local government is putting up for citizen discussion. And as Nole noted earlier, what this does is it builds a repeat business, a subscription with your residents, so that the people who are interested in talking about this topic, they don't go away. They subscribe to get noticed when new topics come out. They come back, and over time, you increase participation to include a broad cross-section of residents. And one final thing, and in a sense, I think this is the most important component of demonstrating that you're actually involving citizens in the real decision-making process, and that's by publishing an outcome statement. Let me show you what that looks like. So let's see, here's Yucca Valley. Let's go, say, to Virginia Beach, and, well, actually, let's come home here. Let's go to Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City does a great job at publishing the outcomes of things. Oh, here's their frequency of participation. You can see a graphic here of the number of people who have participated just once versus the number of people who have participated more than 5 times. These people who have participated on more than 5 topics, these are your regulars, the one who come back over and over again. Well, you can see this online. You can click on this and see what the regulars are saying and compare that against what the people who are coming in for the first time are saying. And it's cool because you can see almost 90% of the people are first-timers in this forum, and that's due in large part to Salt Lake City's attentive efforts at building participation over time. But the final example I'd like to show is the outcome statement. So Salt Lake City and many of our clients, they publish an outcome statement which summarizes, sometimes in just a couple of sentences, what it is that the government is doing in response to the input that people have given. So here's another example of an outcome statement, slightly longer. But this is a statement that is emailed out to the subscribers at the end of the topic when it closes down. So consider yourself a resident. You receive invitations to participate. You then participate, and a few weeks later, you get an actual answer from the decision makers that explains how they, the decision makers, have incorporated the input from everyone into this decision. So Salt Lake and many of our other clients are doing a great job at closing the loop, at showing citizens that their input is having an impact, and that's why participation grows over time steadily, and that's why public trust in government is growing over time steadily, and that's what I personally am most thrilled to see happen. Thank you.
All right, questions?
First of all, what the three of you do is very impressive. I mean, coming from a city where they're just not open to people knowing, they're just not embracive of it, and I'm sure a lot of people live in places like that. To see this is so inspirational with the very different ways that each of you go about it. It's just really impressive. On the fact that this is like a development tool or it's a product or purchase,
Well, we do have multiple opportunities to get user feedback. What you described is an option, although we've never done it that way. But we get multiple, we get user feedback, first of all, by a survey that we actually inject at the end of a user's first interaction with our system. We ask them how they liked Open Town Hall and why or why not. And so we actually see what they write. And generally speaking, it's about 95% of the people say that they like it. Of the people who say that they don't like it, typically the main reason is that they were required to register with their full name and home address and email address, and they felt that was a bit difficult for them. But we require it nonetheless, because we have experience with other systems which don't require it, and it just fills with all kinds of chatter. Okay, so we actually build in intentionally a certain barrier to entrance. You need to be able to be willing to provide us with your real name and home address, and we have a very straightforward privacy policy where we don't share that with anybody without their consent, unless we're required by law to do so. We're not in the data mining business or the marketing business. We're funded by our clients, the local government agencies, and that's usually enough of an assurance to entice people to fill out the form. Yeah, so this is again a client settable option. So some of our, so first of all, we know the real name and home address of everyone, right? In theory everyone. There's a few people who cheat, but they're insignificant really in number. And then our clients make the decision about whether they require people to show that name publicly on the website. And some clients allow people to use the words name not shown, but that's not anonymous. We know who they are. They're just allowing people to use the words name not shown. And there's, for many people who choose that option, there's perfectly legitimate reasons for people to use the words name not shown. For example, a business owner might not want to alienate his or her customers by posting a true and unpopular opinion about a local issue. Or a husband might not want to get into yet another fight with the wife. So there's legitimate reasons, and no one's anonymous, so the quality of the comment that we get from people who post their name is exactly the same as the quality of comments we get from people who use name not shown. Personally, that's one of the things that I'm most excited about, is to see the high quality comments. You know, our clients treat their residents like adults. They invite them to read carefully considered introductions about issues that are important to the community. Most people do read it. We can see in the logs they spend time reading it. Most people spend time reading the informed, constructive comments that come from 95% of the people who choose to participate, and then they themselves generally contribute a constructive comment. So there's a kind of an atmosphere, a kind of a self-setting expectation amongst participants that this is really for grown-ups who want to make a serious contribution to identifying and solving community issues, and most of the people do that. It is not running on the city's website. It's not running on the city's servers. It's running on our servers, and we, our clients' IT requirements are about 10 minutes. They embed, they put a short HTML snippet on one of their websites, one pages, and then it's done.
My other question was, should they fire you from the service? You're the service provider to the council. Who owns the content? Who has access to the content?
Yes. So even if they don't fire us, I'll tell you, every page that displays the statements has 2 links that you can download all the publicly available data, both in PDF form and in a spreadsheet form. So you have machine-readable format for all the public information. And in fact, that's how Public Record Act requests are satisfied. They're not even submitted. If someone wants to submit a Public Record Act request, they just click the link and download the data, and that's it.
What we do for our personal, we print the reports off and insert them into our staff reports. So that becomes part of the public record. So each topic becomes part of the public record through the PDF that gets printed off and compiled into our staff reports and then off to the recorder.
I'm more specifically interested in who has the names, the addresses, the emails, and is that information owned by the council, not by you?
So our clients are from all over the country and have different interpretations of their legal requirements. Our agreement with our client is that we will give them that information if our client tells us that we are legally required to do so. Okay? And so our client makes the call, and we tell the residents who participate that we will not share their information with anyone without their consent unless we're required by law to do so. And so what this does is it informs our customers that this is something that they want to approach carefully, and all of them do. And we've only been asked to hand over the emails from one client to date.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a two-part question too. You said that you provide an introduction, or whatever the survey question is. Is that introduction, such that it's educational in the sense that, you know, for example, with the New York example, is that, you know, by doing this, you get this kind of return on investment? Or is it just kind of, information that we want to make a decision on whether or not, you know, we have Sugar House do this, that, or the other? And what is the introduction like? Is it
Yeah.
kind of persuasive, or is it just facts, or?
Well, our clients are government agencies, and most of them understand that they're supposed to present the unbiased viewpoint of whatever it is being discussed. And in our experience, our clients do that, and they do that well. And in fact, we help them do that. They oftentimes give us a draft introduction, and we oftentimes help them edit it so that the most important salient points occur above the fold, and all the details are below the fold. And so the presentation is in our experience, biased, fact-based information. And moreover, each topic is sometimes in the context of an iteration of several topics. So we've had clients who are interested in developing a public opinion and consensus around potential downtown development plans. And what they do is they launch a series of topics over a year or 2 years long. And much like in your examples, they collect public input, and they then iterate back to the public in subsequent topics based on the input they got in prior topics about the ramifications of this, that, or the other thing, and the community slowly becomes more informed over time with these multiple topics.
And the second part of my question is that who does the analysis of all of this?
Well, everything that I've demonstrated to you today is automatic. It's done by software, okay? And so everyone just gets to click on the maps, and all the information that you saw in those maps and those graphs is also available in electronic form. I'm sorry, your question is transit agencies? Let's see. Well, we're working with the San Francisco Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Does that count? Okay. The answer is yes. Huh? Okay. So you have to help me here. I don't have a planning background. What's the difference?
NPO is a regional planning organization
Okay.
versus a transit agency is the one who actually runs the transit line.
Let me think. I think not. I think we've just been working with the regional agencies.
Can you talk about best practices for soliciting comments on this forum and setting up a forum that's great that people don't come to your website? How do you generally find people, especially the municipal website?
So the best practices for what? Getting people?
Soliciting comments. I mean, putting the forum on your website is great, but
How do you get people to it? Yeah. So that is a good question, and the answer depends a lot on the community. Okay. There are some communities that are highly connected, And with those communities, it's just important to understand who owns the big email lists and who the big tweeters are, and to make sure that you're broadcasting the first topics on those email lists and following those Twitter feeds and inviting them to follow you back and just getting the word out electronically. Other communities are not highly connected, and for those communities, we tend to rely more on traditional mechanisms. For example, one of the greatest things you can do is to put flyers down on the seats in the city council chambers before the meeting starts. People have got nothing to do, and they pick up these flyers, and they've got a QR code on it, and they scan it in, and they sign up right away. So as soon as we get their subscription, their email address, they're in the system. So we advise our clients to do the standard, press releases. They can put the flyers out in the council meetings. They can also put it on TV. If they got a local television station broadcasting their council meetings, they can advertise that and the QR code up there, so people just point their phone at the TV when they're watching the meeting. So there's a variety of mechanisms. They're just posting flyers around town. Some of our clients do that, and we help them design those flyers. So there's a whole spectrum of marketing opportunities for getting the word out, and based on the kind of community we work with, we make recommendations on how to approach that.
My question is for you, Nole. There's two different forums on your website. One is the Open City Hall, and then you have the other one, Speak Out SLC, which the Open City Hall looks like it's topics that the city comes up with, whereas the other one, the residents talk about whatever they want to talk about, which may not be related to what the planning department's looking at that time. So
Yeah.
my question is, how closely do you monitor the Speak Out SLC, and then what do you do with the information that comes from that?
Well, the Speak Out SLC was sort of a guinea pig experiment that we haven't really promoted in a ton. I was bored one day, kind of thing, trying to figure out something to do. Found a product called User Voice. It had a coupon that said 100% off for civic engagement. So I clicked on it, talked to this guy. He's like, "Yeah, sure." He set me up with the account. That's how we got it. And then so basically, I just kind of, we started it out and we said, okay, let's just guinea pig. We're going to ask a question that said, what would you change about Salt Lake City? We put a QR code and like a tiny URL, like the old, and then kind of like the old fashioned, like you're trying to rent your apartment style, and we just stuck them on poles just to see what would happen, right? That's pretty much how we did it, and that's pretty much all the promotion we've given it. And it just sort of started feeding. So then what we started doing is we started adding it as the little widget. So what it is those little feedback things you see on websites where you click on it, survey says kind of stuff. That's what the tool is. So we started inserting it into our websites early, so that we had a chance for earlier conversations. Something that Robert and I have talked about. One of the difficult things is capturing people really early in the process. And so we've been experimenting with that Speak Out tool to do that, to just be really sort of random. Every time someone makes a comment, I get an email. I try to reply sometimes. If we've got a project that's rolling, I redirect them to somewhere, say, hey, thanks for participating, go over here and talk to this guy. Or, hey, this project is starting to keep an eye out, with the Parks Department, or keep an eye out with so-and-so. They're starting to think about something. So it's been pretty informal. Yeah.
Can you talk more about, for your city, how you came to make this decision early on and what the actual implementation was? Because I feel like after you've already got it done, it's all nice and pretty, but how did you get it done? Like, who came up with the idea, like, we really have a mess of a website, and with no citizen participation visually?
Well, I think that was part of my story, is we were in a crisis. Like literally, we were going to lynch mob meetings over this historic landmarks process. Monster homes, demolition, gymnasiums full, people yelling, shouting. People were just in a panic, right? And we were like no other, we were the same as every other city, right? We were just like afraid to move from our own shadow, afraid to change anything. So it was really was like I said, hey, here's a possible out, and out of desperation, like, yeah, well, we're willing to try anything. So I was able to bypass a lot of bureaucracy because of that. And eventually Robert and I hooked up, but I first found, literally sitting in a conference like this, I'm getting emails, I'm in a conference presenting something else, and my email, city councilman, damn you, damn this, it's the mayor's fault. I mean, it was really ugly, right? So we came home with a possible solution, I was like this hero. And that opened the door, right? That opened the door. And from then we got we were just really lucky. I mean, our mayor is an FAICP planner and land use attorney, Mayor Becker, so he understands public engagement, right? And had confidence. My last boss, I've got a new boss, Eric Shaw, who's super nice, but my last boss, Frank Gray, was fearless, right? He'd been around for so long. He's like, yeah, throw whatever you want against the wall. We'll see what sticks. So I just got really lucky with a support group following that drama. And they let me now, I can just kind of mess around.
I also want to add to Nole's response to that. He did get really lucky. He had this amazingly supportive management structure who said, go with it. That was several years ago. That was 3 years ago now. His experience is unusual. Most cities and counties that start online civic engagement do not do it in the crisis mode. Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, that's generally the last thing they do in the crisis mode. Nowadays, it's much more common for government agencies to do online civic engagement, and they do it because they recognize that this is the way they need to engage with their citizens. Yeah.
Well, and I think as an example, when we started, we didn't really have reference points.
Yep.
Right? We didn't really have a reference point as to was it legitimate. Today it's legitimate,
Yep.
right? Yeah. Yes, please. I have questions for him too.
Sure. What we've done, and actually the gentleman who's sort of led us down this path, the guru sitting in the back, Neil. So Neil, just raise your hand if you're listening, which you may or may not. And we've actually spun off this company and partnered with Neil, and we've created a proprietary system. And I remember early on, we're like, how the heck are we going to do this? We need to have a certain amount of data. We need to have a certain amount of control of that. But at the same time, it has to be fleshed out. We didn't have a $100,000 budget for honestly something that, as a developer, I didn't know if we were opening a can of worms that we wouldn't be able to control. I just knew that the alternative was 8 years and battling it out, and how could it be worse than that? So we built a system from scratch, and it really revolves around the voting application. I'd love to chat with you because Neil and I have discussed, I'd like to get more of that forum side of it also. But it's the voting application that's really the key. So originally we actually, used non-proprietary software. What was the company, Neil? It wasn't Facebook. What was it? But no, before that, for the forum side. We could do like your customer. Anyway, what we did is we basically just bought an off-the-shelf product so people could Ning. So we had a Ning group to start some conversation, and then we had a separate voting application, which is obviously an issue. People had to register twice. We only owned half the content, all that. So we eventually put that together because it started to succeed. So when people sign that agreement, we can make these adjustments, we can make these changes. We actually adjusted from Bristol where we allowed some level of anonymity and recognized when we brought it to Long Island, that could be just a disaster area because, you're going to have the Agenda 21 people come in and say, you don't know who I am, I'm going nuts. And we actually make sure, and it's very similar, you don't have to necessarily display your real name, but we're going to know generally 98% of the time who you are. So it's a proprietary system, and we're actually at the point now where, obviously as a developer, we'd love to keep it to ourselves, but we recognize there's value elsewhere. The key, and we're trying to find ways to involve this in the public spectrum for whether it's planning or municipal planning, but one of the joys of what we do as a developer is we're going to actually build what you say. So it's not, all right, we got some great ideas, now let's come up with a plan, now let's find someone who might want to implement all of our ideas. And that also makes it real, because you put up that bookstore, I'd love to build it for you, but I'm telling you, I'm not going to put the money in, and I don't think anyone else is. So there's sort of a reality test, and people can sort of see that, and I think it makes it a more genuine process.